using the internal mic, so it's going to be nothing but clickety-clack the entire time. But anyway, so is this it? Was that the starting bell? Bing. All right. I'm so nervous. Let's see. So
let me introduce you.
Oh yeah, let me go behind the curtain.
Can I introduce? So we've got Jeremy coming in hot from St. Augustine tonight. He's going to talk about testing, and this dude is super smart. Like, I was like,
oh great.
Just, listening to some side conversations a
going
couple
to
meetups ago, and like, let's listen. Like,
all right, thank you. Yeah, quiet, please.
Mr. Really, how smart are you?
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna go for handsome, but we'll take smart. So anyway, So like Matt said, my name is Jeremy, and here to talk about testing with you. I know everybody's dying to see this hidden tab here. Boom, there it is. I am not a UX guy, so let's just put that out there. The buttons work though, so that's what's important. So I might vamp a little bit because I don't know. I was trying to compress this down because there's a lot to talk about, right? I don't want to talk about why you should test. I don't really want to even talk about the best ways to test. I feel like there are plenty of resources for both of those. And if I tried to imitate those, I would just do a poor job and you wouldn't get anything out of this. There is another angle, though, to talk about testing. It's in my experience, you go, whether it's going to a talk or reading a blog or watching a video or reading a book or whatever, everything makes sense, really compelling arguments, seems easy, anybody can do it. Then you get all pumped up and you try it at work or at home or whatever, and it's like you're looking at something totally different and it just doesn't work. And then that guy whispering, "There's no time, we just got to get it done," he's starting to really make sense now. And so that's what I want to focus on. Basically, writing imperfect tests that still have value, sort of like testing in real life, a little about me. My name's Jeremy. I'm an architect at a startup in Atlanta, and I've been interested in testing probably since about 2010. I first read Test-Driven Development by Example by a guy named Kent Beck, probably heard of. And since then, I have advocated for testing, whether TDD or full integration testing, at all the places I've worked at, and I've had various degrees of success, lots of resistance, and I've learned over time that the guys who say there's no time, I just got to get it done, they're not necessarily, just vastly ignorant like I thought they were. They haven't read the same blogs. They have, but they might have more experience, and they've had a worse experience, and they realize that sometimes these tests get in the way. And so really what I hear when somebody tells me that is they need to recalibrate, and they need to have a better balance of the benefit versus the cost of their tests, because in that case it sounds like they're not getting it. So to assist, we're going to go over this little app here. It's a React app with a little dash of Redux in it, and because it is a dry topic, I want to encourage anybody, if you have a question or a snarky comment or a really wild esoteric question for me to show how dumb I am, maybe not that, but like if you do want to chime in, let me know. If you need to stand up and do jumping jacks, I'll try and keep it short. We're going to go and just show a basic primer of like what is testing, why would you want it. Then we'll go to how do I test these really ugly legacy components that I got, and then finish off with I got high order components now. How do I test that? And then if anybody's still here, we can have pizza, or we can just turn it over and just kind of freestyle, ask any questions, ask each other, whatever, and we'll just play it by ear. So, again, I encourage any sort of feedback along the way. So, I'm sorry if this is difficult to see, but mostly you're just going to be looking for green and red. Is this okay-ish for people? Yeah? Okay. So here on... I already have that. Okay, so here on the left, I should ask, before we actually get started, who has experience testing generally? No, okay, so it's not a foreign concept. And testing React? Some, okay. Probably the most popular right now, I know you mentioned a different one that's kind of cool, but the sort of the basic kit you get with React right now is, you know, you're expected to use jest and enzyme to manipulate the components and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to use. And here on this left section, I'm going to be running jest, which, well, it goes in, it finds all of your tests and runs them at different periods. Won't go into that too much. But over here you'll see green if everything's good, red if something's amiss. And on this side, you are going to see some lovely code that we'll be editing. So let's start nice and easy with what is a test and why do we care? So our reference app here, we've got this Rubik's Cube component. Look at how easy that is to solve. World record probably. So it's a complex thing, right? So let's where am I? So if anybody is a little bit nervous, I definitely recommend using Vim while talking because it's just the best. So I might fat finger some stuff, but whatever. At least I'm not touching the mouse, which I will touch the mouse for fun. Anyway, so our Rubik's Cube component here. It's a big, ugly component, and without going into details, we'll see this in a minute. This will demonstrate why we have tests. Now, again, if it's hard to see, you can kind of watch for the highlight here, the little cursor. I'm going to delete some of the stuff in this handler, and without having to understand anything else about what's going on with this component, you can see over here, we got some red. And over here, our app, it's still serving, it's still, you know, building, but it doesn't work, right? So that's a great example of what a test is useful for. It basically, it's little bits of code that run parts of your app and test that it gets the result that it expects.
It's 18 hours.
It's 18 hours, in case anybody's interested. I'm not a great talker. Yes, sir. Wait, I got to get you on the webcam so my wife can see that.
What you just did, wouldn't that show up at compile time?
Well,
Don't mock me yet.
I thought you were...
No, I have the same question.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I
you
mean,
know, you
it's
compile it, it
transpile
says,
time.
you know.
Well, it's not actually. So if I did something egregious, like, I don't know, imported act, that's not going to work. Because, I mean, there's the whole static analysis, which the linter uses. The compiling is, you know, Webpack, I guess, is basically doing that for us. So some errors are caught there. I mean, JavaScript's interpreted, so there's not a true compiler. So our toolkit, we have the build process, which will catch certain things like this. You know, the linter can, like I said, it does more of a static analysis and tries to figure out if things make sense. And but there are certain classes of goofs that you can make, like that, like undo. Oops, where am I? Like I swear I use this every day. Anyway. Like this is still valid syntax, right? It's not being used, but it's still valid JavaScript. So like there's nothing to alert there. The linter doesn't know that this is a problem. So this would fly under the radar until QA found it or somebody, right? Where are we? So that's just the gist of it. This just gives you a way to very quickly run a whole bunch of different tests to catch a different category or a different class of errors. And that's a good point, actually, because you tend sometimes if you get into the whole testing cabal, you start to think that tests will fix everything. If we just test enough, if we have enough coverage, then there will be no problems, right? It's not true. It's a tool. It'll help with certain things, and this is one of them. So that's why a test is useful. We're only running one or two, but I mean, at work I run, I don't know, my suites are, I don't know, say in the thousands, and they run very quickly. And so it's a lot faster than going into the UI and clicking all the buttons and making sure they do what they're supposed to. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go in here to another component. This is just my top level app component. It doesn't have a test, and I'm going to prove that by going over here, and you can kind of filter what tests are running. I'm going to say, show me all the app tests. It says I don't have any. So let's go ahead and make one real quick. And the reason I'm doing this on the fly is not because it's easy to talk and type. It's because I really promise you that it's super easy to start testing. Once you do it enough, you realize that there's a pattern that emerges. And it's different categories for maybe components, high order components, Redux stuff, pure logic, whatever it is. But once you do it enough, you start to see the patterns. And so what I've been doing for quite a while is I have these templates. So here on the left, I'm going to make a new test file for app. So you see app test ran, and it's like, whoa, there's nothing in here. So already, I mean, it's not a lot of benefit, but it's trying to run this. So let me show you. I'm going to read from my templates here. So it's going to pull in the content and shove it in here, and then I'm going to say, do a global substitution, change all the foos to app, and save. And now you see that pretty green on the left. We have some test coverage for the app component. So this is what I'm going for. Like, it's what I was thinking is testing can often be like going to the gym. Like getting there and starting is the hardest part. Once it's going though, you can get into it. And so this, you have to agree that that's pretty easy. I added a test. And granted, the test doesn't do much, but it will, check that our, oh goodness, it'll check that say like the dependencies are, where we expect them to be. Again, you could get that from other tools as well, but this is pretty fast. And it'll check that that the component renders. That's it. Doesn't do much more, but it's a springboard into more tests. So you make a component, add your basic does it render test, and that it cuts a whole bunch of excuses out of the way. Because like there, you can add that. And if nothing else, if I have devs that are submitting PRs and they have new components that don't just have that, I just shake my head and I cry. I don't know. I mean, this is better than nothing, right? When let me check in. I do have a habit to get going, so please cough or throw something at me if you want a breather. Everybody tracking though?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is this enzyme this testing library, ReactJax?
It's enzymes more like an additive for it. So Jest finds the tests and runs them and sort of reports on stuff. An enzyme is a tool that helps you to do stuff with it. Like natively, it's the React test utils, I think, which kind of sucks. And this is like a better version of it. So yeah, they're different tools, and you can use different ones. Remind me, what's the one you were talking about?
React testing library.
React testing library, creative name.
It's another one.
There's I mean there are many.
Yeah.
Shameless plug. I made my own. It's really bad though.
So whatever is in the left pane is all about like whatever the scripts you're writing on that particular directory, it's automatically start consuming and running it all the time.
Yeah, in this case, and this is very configurable. You can have it where it tests everything it can find. It tests only things that are changing, only certain patterns. But yeah, right now,
That's where just is playing that.
Right. Yeah. This is Jest that's running these tests for us.
Okay.
This is the content, and this is the result. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. And that's an important distinction, actually. Enzyme is not it's not the de facto tool, but it is very popular, so that's what we're sticking with. Okay, so testing is really easy when it's easy, right? So, like, yeah, we could just stop here and be like, I learned so much. Or we could try to do something a little more challenging. So, let's do that. Let's see, the Rubik's component. I think that's it. And so we got this Rubik's Cube component. I'm not sure the best way to present this, so I'm going to, let's see. Here on this panel here, we'll just go through the test, right? Let's get familiar with it real quick. Like I said, it's just like a regular Rubik's Cube. You solve the corners and the edges in the middle, and it's solved. And then you can scramble it up again, right? Everybody knows how to do that. There's a bonus here. If you're not familiar with the React Dev tools, you can actually use / to search through it, and then it accepts regex, which is pretty cool. But if you're an awesome tester, you might not need this very much. Anyway, so part of what this component does, and remember, this is not a pristine, well-written component. This is a junk component with lots of weird logic and lots of local state. Again, if this was a simple component, there's no challenge. It's easy. This is a bad component that the other guy made that we got to test, right? You know, or we made last week. So when the state changes in this, I don't know how well you can see this, but there's an incomplete class name here, which is showing the incomplete version. Once the cube is complete, that changes to complete, changes the picture, and we've got a wonderful experience. So I'm coming in after the fact. I know TDD guys, don't kill me, but I'm coming in after the fact, and I want to write a test that says, hey, once this cube reaches this state, it shows the correct class name, right? So I'm going to use the mouse because it might be a little easier here. This is the test. I'm going to, let me set this up to just run the Rubik's Cube stuff. I'm gonna make an instance of it, and I'm gonna look through it, and I'm gonna look for the incomplete class. And if I see one of those, okay, that's my first assertion. Very good. Then I'm going to solve the cube by manipulating it, and then I'm going to check that it is now complete. If you don't cringe when you see stuff like this, talk to me in like 6 months. This is ugly. Got a weird sense about us, but you know it's working. So we'll just go on to the next one. Does everybody understand what this test is doing? Okay. So the next one, when the component is solved, when it reaches that magic state, I want it to tell the rest of the application. And so I've got an onComplete prop in here. I've got a spy for that. Sort of the same thing. I set it up, I solve the thing, and then I say, hey, was onComplete called? If it was, I get a green check mark over here. If it was not, I get the sad red color. So you probably, you know, I don't know the experience level. Yes, sir.
Yeah, question. So when you're testing, do you always pull up React DevTools and see the state, and that's how you determine how you're going to write your test?
No, I mean personally, I am kind of one of those TDD jerks, and I get into the UI way after I'm done with everything else. If I'm exploring and I don't really know what I want to do, then yeah, maybe. I was just kind of demonstrating it because it's neat, honestly. If I'm having a really good day, I'll implement a feature like soup to nuts and then start up the server and just verify that it did what I thought it would do. But again, I'm not going to harp on that. That's for a different day, I guess.
Question.
Yes, sir.
In your button click
Yes.
statements, is there a way to find button by its label?
Yeah, you can. That would be a better way to do it. I don't think I have labels. I just have the inner text right now.
Okay.
But yeah, you have a variety of different ways. This is for those of you who are not familiar with Enzyme. It's a very jQuery-like selector sort of thing going on. So you have a number of ways that you can select. This is a purposefully dumb example, but yeah, that would be a lot better one.
I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, you can do that. You can do a number of things. But since you brought up my terrible selectors here, it's like a plant, right? Well, yes, I do have an answer. So yeah, the reason I cringe when I see this stuff is because, as anybody knows, once it's all working, sorry, I'm gonna have to go vertical here. Once it's all working, product says, you know what? We realize when people do a Rubik's Cube, they scramble it and then they solve it. So we want the scramble button on the top, and then we want all the the other buttons on the bottom. All right, no problem. Here it is. Everything's working great, as we can see. Everybody's very happy, especially the guy that said tests are stupid, because look, our app is working perfectly right now, doing exactly what we want it to do, minimal change, so easy, and we have a bunch of broken tests. So they are not adding any value, they're only cost, and that guy's snickering in the corner like I told you, you know. So this was kind of my, I begrudgingly, I mean, sometimes they do have a point. And so like you mentioned, I don't think the answer is not to test, because there is value here. It's just we slipped off of it because of our selectors. So let's look at these. I don't know the best way to do this. I prefer this view. I'm sorry about the chaos on the side, but So the reason this is not working anymore is because these sort of positional selectors, we said, hey, find a button, give me the first one, the 0 index, and simulate a click, and then the second, and then the third. And this is the proper way to test because you want to keep that some encapsulation and kind of keep stuff at arm's length. And so the right way to interact with this component is to click the buttons, because a user is going to be clicking buttons. A user is not going to be opening the console and finding a reference and manhandling the state probably. So this is the right way to do it, but it's no good. So like here we are, right? So we could increment all this stuff, and that first test works, right? And so we can, why not? Let's do it again. Okay, it's easier than learning a new way to do things, right? But hey, here comes product again. Hey, actually we like it the first way. Oh, so now this test is really, it's doing nothing for us. It's just a heartache. So using poor selectors like this, duplicating stuff like this, it might work right now, but just watch out, because you are very likely adding tech debt, and every time this changes, you're just be lugging that around for this test. So if that's thrilling, we can stop right there and we can show a cool way to do it after pizza.
I have a quick question.
Ah, yes, sir.
So, like, because we're dealing with split events here,
Yes.
how complicated is it to deal with async? And do you have to, like, time stuff out, like, manually?
Yeah. I'm not going to go into it too much here, but it's part of Jest, and it's pretty easy. If you return a promise, or you can add an argument that's like a done argument, and when you're done, you can call done. You can do async stuff pretty painlessly. I'm not going to do it right now though, because I always mess it up. So that's a nail biter. Let's grab some pizza, and then we'll figure out a better way to write this test. Yeah. All right. Gotta watch it. I start to get excited and then like casually drop F-bombs. I'm like, somebody kick me in the shin if I start really cussing.
I'm sorry. We're talking about testing. It's okay.
YouTube terms of service and agreements, you can cast that. You just have to rate your video properly.
Oh, really?
Or else it will be demonetized.
Oh, demonetized. I was gonna strike it rich with this.
Are you a YouTuber?
No, I have friends that are.
Oh, really?
I've done some development work for YouTubers. This is special.
I should pause it, huh?
Not like special.
Just keep going.
Special development.
So I can be famous on YouTube, right?
You already want to be famous on YouTube.
Yeah, no, it's not an aspiration I have. All right, so
Pop Rock Challenge.
nailed it. All right, so if everybody is ready, we're going to go ahead and resume. Previously on testing React, we saw that we can go and spend time updating these selectors, and then our test will work. But if the UI changes again, oh my goodness, who would imagine, we'll have to update our tests again. So there is a better way. I'll say one more time, this is the correct way to do it, but our component is such a mess, it's not the optimal way to do it in this case. So hold your nose, we're about to do something a little silly. Instead of, just tip here, you can use F in front of any it or describe, and it'll say focus on this. So I'm going to focus just on this test, so we can do one at a time. So it's failing because it should show that it's solved, right? So if we step back and look at this, our intent here is to just verify that the state of this component is being expressed a certain way. Namely, when it's, initially comes up, it is incomplete. And then later, when it is complete, we see this complete thing. So, to get from state A to state B, we're having to go through and poke around at a bunch of stuff. This is contrived stuff. And, a real component, you might have just all these weird, conditional renders based on props and all this nonsense going on. So as silly as this looks, a real one is way worse. And again, though, getting to the heart of the matter, I don't care how it got there. I just want to say when it's in this state, it looks like this. And so we're implicitly testing all the functionality around these buttons here, right? And as we can see, that's very brittle. So instead of that, this is probably not unique to enzyme, but this is a trick that you will can access in enzyme. You can just grab our component, our wrapper here, and say, hey, set the state to complete. And it works, right? So if we change the order of the buttons, it doesn't matter because we're not interacting with the buttons. We're just setting the state. If you read the docs for set state, it says don't do this. That's a bad idea. You should be clicking the buttons. But that's in a perfect world, right? So still, if you're a little uneasy, we have something else we can do. If we go to our second test here, the on-call complete. Remember, once we've massaged the component just right, it says, hey, I have achieved this state, and now I am calling this onComplete handler to let the rest of the app know. So we're here, working our magic on it, and there's a different way that we can do this. It's pretty aggressive to reach into the component and grab its brain and say, this is your new state. It's very intrusive, and it's uncomfortable. It should be. It's not something you normally want to do. This is really expensive. Even though it's right, it just doesn't feel right. So another thing you can do, you can grab an instance here, and you can actually go in, say, let me just give a little background. I'm going to change this. I don't know, this is kind of hard to see, right? So this is our Rubik's Cube component. And yeah, there's the state, and I could manhandle that. I just don't really want to. The component, the buttons, it's confusing. I'm not happy doing that either, but there's sort of a middle ground. I know that I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to use these handlers in here. And, there might be some complex logic in there that you really want to expose and kind of exercise and see that it does what you want, but you don't really know the right combination to get it to activate, and even if you could figure it out, it's a pain. You don't want to do that. So an alternative, like I said, you grab the instance here. There you go. And I'm going to bypass all of the button clicking, and I'm just going to say, hey, close this. So let's see if we can match these up. So I'm going to say, hey, the instance, execute this, and then do this, and finally do that. And I don't have to bother with the UI or the visible part of the components. I'm not really going right after the state. I'm kind of in between. So maybe this is a little more appealing to you. It's not perfect. It's not as bad as what we just did. And then again, I'm not trying to prescribe one solution for any of these. I'm just going to show you. I just want to show you different options so that you can use your discretion to say, hey, in this case, maybe I could just reach to those. And we see that now both of these are working. And let's see, where's our... I guess we could go crazy here and just, hey, product says they don't want any buttons anymore. Well, that's all right because our cube still works. So that's kind of a silly example, but you see that we are no longer lugging around the debt of going back and fixing up those funky selectors every time something changes. This is an extreme example, but the point still stands. So that's how you can deal with an ugly component. You can go real hard and just grab and do whatever you want. You can kind of be more selective. You should always try to deal with a component through its public interface, i.e. props and emitting events off of the components within it. Because again, you're trying to simulate what a user would do. I mean, a user's not going to go in and redefine undefined. So let's just pretend you're a user. But this is another option if that's not working for you.
Ask a question.
Yes, sir.
What's the wrapper and instance? What's happening there? Like, what is shallow do?
Let's see. So that's a good question. Let's focus on that. It's a deep question. What is shallow? yeah, I guess this is part of my convention. I'm just so used to this. My template that I always use is this. When you let me back up here. So if we just look at one specifically, this test, we've got a wrapper that is the result of shallow, which is the result of factory. If we kind of unfold that a bit, the factory is just some props and our component that we want to test. That in turn is passed to shallow, and you can see shallow is a function of enzyme. I won't go too in depth with that, but that builds your components as if it were in a browser environment, so that you can goof around, poke, query it, touch it, do all sorts of stuff like that. Shallow, there are other versions, not just shallow, but I find that in practice, shallow is basically all you need.
So it's kind of like React DOM.render.
Yeah.
Pass it a component.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's I think that internally that's probably exactly what it does. I don't know,
Okay.
but yeah, this is where we grab our components and we render it, right? I mean, I guess this is more like instantiating it. And the convention wrapper, that actually comes from the enzyme documentation, because shallow returns what they call a wrapper. It's not your component. It's more like if you have jQuery and you select a div, the result is not the div. The result is this jQuery wrapper around the div. So it's a very similar sort of idea. And again, I stick to this convention of having wrapper and then expect. And yeah, I could change this name to Rubik's Cube or something like that. But then in my other test, I would have to change it to something else. And I find that uniformity actually helps a lot with tests, because as much as I enjoy writing tests, that's not what I'm getting paid for. You can go down that rabbit hole and just like write tests all day, and you feel so good, and then you haven't done anything. And again, that guy in the corner snickering about tests is like, okay, I get what you're saying. And so I really, again, as much as I enjoy writing tests, I want to spend as little time as possible. And so just stuff like the convention of always using the same name, I find useful, because all my tests look the same. I can spot anomalies easily. Sorry, what was the other part? Were you asking about the expect?
Well, I think you explained it though. When you say .instance on there, then you're actually getting your component.
Yes, that's like. Does anybody remember jQuery? If you
Yep.
Is it get or at or something to like get the if you have a collection and like you grab,
Get.
is it get?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just similar to that then. It's because it's like, here's my wrapper and I want the instance that's in that. So it's a very similar thing. Again, I will caution, and I'll shut up about this, but if you're using instance, something's not right. Either you don't know what you're doing with the test, or you have a really challenging component that you're messing with, because you generally don't need that. Or you're bypassing mount, which I do a lot, but it's different. So yeah, instance gives you the actual instance of the component, and then from there, using the terminology, right? So these methods that we're calling, like handle corners fix, that is an instance method. So now that I have the instance, I can use it just like any chunk of JavaScript. So yeah, that's what that is. Sorry to gloss over that. All right.
Sorry.
Oh yeah,
I'm good.
that's it.
You very briefly talk about the alternatives to shallow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really, from a practical perspective, this is it's an enzyme concern, and I may be wrong, but I think it's just shallow or mount. And mount, what it does is it actually, there are life cycle methods in React components. Component will mount, component did mount, blah blah blah. Now, if you are in a situation where you need some sort of a setup to happen in your component, like in component did mount or component will mount, it sets some sort of initial state or something like that. You're not going to get that from shallow, because it's just saying it doesn't. The short version is it doesn't call the lifecycle methods. It actually there's some trickiness to how it renders that's slightly different that I don't recall, but it again, I'm no coward when it comes to tests, but that way leads to complexity, and so I generally avoid it. And I'll even cheat sometimes if I really need to, and I'll grab a shallow instance because it's cheap. It doesn't really need a browser, and then I need to run this lifecycle method. I'll use an instance to do that, and then I can make my assertions. I think that generally speaking, you can stick to shallow because mount just makes things complicated, and I prefer simple and explicit for tests. Let's see. It's kind of a BS answer, right? I don't know. I use shallow. He was first, actually. Yes.
I think I could add maybe something that
Yes, please.
there's also render. From what I understand, nobody really uses render. But the main, so like shallow only renders one level deep.
Oh, yeah.
It won't render anything as simple as one level deep. So essentially, it's mocking everything after that, which you may or may not want. And then mount is going to actually render it to a div and then add that div as a child element to the body, which also which allows all the lifecycle hooks to run, and also that delegation, which is React.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like the most important difference of shallow and mount, it's shallow, which is it's good. It feels like handcuffs when you first get into Enzyme because you're struggling already with the differences. And okay, I've got this thing rendered, and then I want to dig down and I want to make some sort of an assertion, and it doesn't exist. And you just get really frustrated, and then you see in the docs, it's like, oh, it's shallow. It's just one level. And like if you have 100 children in there, like yeah, it knows about them and they're there in a superficial way, but you don't really get to touch them. And you're like, why not? I'm so close. And that's why it's to enforce good testing practices, because there's again like you got to keep this stuff at arm's length. And there are situations where you want to get down and life cycle and different or environmental concerns. But yeah, generally. Shallow will keep you testing just this thing, and if you're trying to go deeper, it's a sign that you need to sort of refactor things. But yeah, thank you for that. It's like I said, I think once I made that discovery, I stopped trying to use mount because it was just too painful. So, the last official scripted part I want to show you. So we saw just a basic, easy component, no challenge. We've seen our ugly component and sort of some ways around this. So there's another type of component here. And is anybody using Redux? Or, I mean, I should say, have you been living under a rock for the last, yeah. So anyway, for those who haven't seen this, Redux is, I'm not going to even go into it in too much detail, but basically you can see there's the state that's happening over here, and there are some sort of there are events that we can Redux understands. It adds a lot of sanity to your app, and to get the whole Redux side talking to your React component side, you want to use a library to kind of marry those. I guess technically you could do your own, but everybody uses React Redux, which comes with this cool little thing called Connect. It's funny, you can tell I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to start saying buzzwords. So let's see. So the convention here, if you've run across this stuff, you basically have a container, and if you're very strict about it, the container interacts with Redux, pulls stuff from the state, and sort of dispatches stuff to it. And the standard way to set that up is the container then has a real sort of vanilla React component within that it gets fed stuff to. So the container is very, very thin, and it's just there to interact with Redux. Here it is. Like I said, you can see how it's changing stuff. We saw our state changing and all that. So there you go. Now, this is you see these all over. I mean, like I said, if you're doing React, you will be running into Redux sooner or later. So my component for that is the user container, right? And as I described, it's got this connect stuff, which is connecting it to Redux. There's this stuff that is kind of Reduxy stuff. And then the real guts of the component is I'm taking these props, and I got this child here, and I'm giving them some different props. That's the gist of it. So, like I said earlier, it's super easy to make tests. So let's make a test. Now let's change this to user container. So I'm going to open up a new panel. This is my user container.test.js. I'm going to save it. It's going to say, hey, you got to do something here. So let's we're going to read in our template for components, and with our magic substitute of foo for user container, we're most of the way there. So I told you this was easy, but there are still some curveballs. So I am a firm believer in reading error messages sometimes. Because more often than not, they have the answer. In practice, it's hard. On the way here, I actually was convinced that Heroku was down until we actually read the message. Like, oh, never mind, that was us. So I try to read them when I can, just when I want to feel preachy and tell everybody else to read them. But if we read this error message, it says, hey, I tried to render, it didn't work. I got this invariant violation. I couldn't find a store in the context or the props of this component, so because what's his name is so cool, he even said, hey, why don't you wrap this in a provider or give it the store, and then it's going to work. Well, what does that mean? Because reading it's one thing, interpreting it is another. So we got our user container, right? We're rendering it just like we did the other one. But if we look over on the right, our export default is not exporting the user container. It's exporting the results of passing connect this this Reduxy stuff, and then taking the result of that and passing user container. So what you get out of the other side is not user container the way that we're thinking of it, like this thing. What we're actually importing over here, despite what we've named it, is connect wrapped up with, the user container wrapped in connect. So now the error message makes sense. Okay, I won't go into the details of that, but to make this thing happy, to get it to work, we're going to have to give it the Redux stuff that it's meant to work with. So I've done this in the past, and so you can create a provider and wrap it around there. You can create a store and put it in the provider, or add the store. You can do this. The short version is it leads to a lot of overhead. I won't elaborate on that too much, but if you're recreating your entire application state to test that a button exists, like that really is no fun. No, I don't know. In the interest of laziness, I mean, it's pragmatism, because it's so tests like that, they're no fun. People stop writing them. They break. People disable them. And so I think that rather than shooting for that, there's another thing you can do that, it doesn't give you all of the benefits, but it reduces a ton of the cost. So if you are like me on a Friday night, reading through source code, you may have run across the, just kidding, I have kids. I'm watching Netflix. Never mind. Anyway, so the connect, it actually, this, what's his name? Thank you. Yeah, like this dude, man. I mean, it gives you useful error messages. He gives you hidden gems like this. Wrapped component. That's this thing. Whatever was injected to connect, or rather, whatever connect has wrapped, it is exposed as wrapped component. I think this is documented, but it's not really well known. I don't know anybody else that uses it. It's semi-convention. There's a React International, or INTL. They use a higher order component, and similarly, they provide the vanilla component within with the same name. So it's kind of an Easter egg. I don't know, but I mean, this is a way to get at that bare component and just bypass all the other stuff, right? So check it out. Again, we're not doing perfect tests here. We're trying to figure out how to write good tests that are cheap. So here I am using, well, it's the same thing we just saw. Sorry, the resolution's a little funky. But here I've got my wrapped component, and now I can go in and test this just like I would the app component or the Rubik's Cube or the foo or the bar or any of those sort of things. So as long as that makes sense, we'll just demonstrate. Here's on login, right? And I'm just saying, hey, I got my wrapper, which we've seen. I want to find the user inside there. Oh, find the user. There it is. And I'm going to simulate the login from the user. And now, did you map to this one? So this is all I'm doing. I'm just testing that this stuff was mapped correctly. And that's kind of weird, but that's the whole purpose of a user or of a connect high order component. Take this Redux stuff, map it to this regular component, But wait, that's not the entire purpose. Whoa, caps locks, gotta love it. Yay. Okay, that's not the entire purpose. Because there is this pesky, map stuff happening here, which isn't just here for fun. And this has a purpose, right? So if I change some of this, my tests are still happy. Because nothing's broken build-wise. The linter doesn't care. I go over here. I forgot I deleted my buttons. I log in. Okay, we got Uncle Bob. Come on, nod to the old timers. Anyway, he knows. I log out. What? Again, that guy in the corner laughing about tests that don't work. Well, I mean, we've made a conscious decision here. We intentionally cut this stuff out because of the cost of setting it up. So, again, I'm not going to say what's right and what's wrong. This is just an option. If it's really, really hard, I mean, this is trivial, but just be aware that this now has a hole in it. On the other hand, it's really easy to test this kind of stuff. Say I mismapped, one of the props here, right? And I save it. Oh my goodness, I expected to see the user, but I didn't. And I say, oh, you're right. Thank you, tests. So there is value in here, and just it's a lot cheaper to make. So consider that. All right, I'm going to go on the home stretch. Everybody's ready. All right, jQuery. No.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Line. Is that line 2?
Which line 2?
Jest.fn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't explain this. So again, Jest is our test runner. It does the assertions, and Enzyme sort of deals with the components and that sort of stuff. So they work together really well. Jest is say, hey, I described this thing, and I described this, and it should da-da-da-da-da. And so they work together. And one of the very useful things that Jest does that, what was it, Sign-On? Sign-On? I never knew how to pronounce it. Yeah, it's Jasmine. Like, everybody had a way to mock and to yeah, it's not just a mock. I guess it's a spy. People split hairs about which is which. I don't know. But yeah, it's a spy. So basically, this is a function that does nothing else but record when it's called. And so here I say, hey, login is just fn, which is, here, give me this dummy thing. I'm going to go ahead and feed it into my component. I'm going to do something to the component, and then I'm going to expect that my spy here was called. And I could say that it was called, that it was called with, banana.
So is it just passing an empty function?
No, it is not an empty function. Well, no, it's actually a complex function. It's a function that has. Here, I'll log it for you. Let me just show you real quick though. I expected it to be called with banana, but it was called with undefined. So this is cool. So let's check it out, just for the heck of it. A nice little detour. So people forget. I don't know. I've been doing this for so long, but I console log like it's going out of style, man. Like, no shame. Like, if it gets you the answer quickly, like, whatever, man. It's like Anyway,
This is something I've struggled with. When I'm walking through testing with other people who they've struggled with it, it's like I run the test suite and I didn't see the console log. But
you don't see that?
interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah. They're again. Are you talking about Jest?
Are you running it like npm run test, or are you running like just
I
Jest?
use npm. No, I'm using Yarn. No. Sorry. I actually kind of know him, so I'm being a little looser. I'm really not that rude usually.
I heard that like gulp and if you're using like the npm, it'll sometimes swallow the console log. And
No.
so also Jest.
I mean, it's very sensitive to how your environment's set up and all that sort of stuff, but just Jest out of the box, run Jest, it's going to show you this stuff. What I bet is happening, you can see here, I did a console log, right? And this is just a wild guess because I've spent a lot of time debugging tests. Say I have this, here let's, I don't want to get too deep into this, but since you asked, I expect this to happen, but it didn't. Let's log it, right? So I'm going to log it here. Oh, come on. Oh, wait. Where's my banana? I expect it to be called with 1, and it's failing. So let me add this console log. Well, I don't see the log. Because what any testing framework does, they're assertion libraries. And so it's really a dolled up try-catch. And so when you see this expect, it's got some cool stuff in there that just says do this, and it's like your standard sort of assert, and it'll throw. And it has really pretty errors that it throws.
So if you put the log above it,
Boom. So, and the reason for that, for anybody that's not super into code yet, when you hit an error and it throws, it basically says scrap everything, go back up. I'm not going to finish running this code because something went wrong. So if your logs are after the expectation that's failing or the assertion, then you wouldn't see it.
can you just quickly quit out of your test suite and rerun it?
I can. The startup is the longest part. Oh, did you want to see what it actually is?
Yeah, I want
Oh.
to see.
Well, oh yeah. So I'm running Yarn. That was a joke. I mean, it basically is npm. I guess again, these are. I don't know if you guys can see that all right. There are many options. I'm not going to get into them, but I like watch because, like you mentioned, as I change stuff, it runs it again. I like bail because once something errors, I want to see it. I don't want you to bother wasting, running more. And I want verbose because I like errors. To each his own. There are many ways to do that. But I find that if you're going to go the TDD route, just get my soapbox again, which is a good idea. Having your test there running as you go is kind of mandatory because you start in a very asinine, crazy way and you write a test that says foo is 1. And you don't even have any code yet, and it fails. And you're like, oh no! And then you write the code to make it happy, and then you refactor it. It's a red-green refactor sort of mantra. Anyway, so what were we talking about? React? Sorry, I will go on for hours. So yeah,
You were reacting in Jest.
that's nice. So
would
funny.
you recommend Mocha as opposed to Jest, or is it just your preference?
Oh, TJ. What's Mocha? No. No, it's not in vogue anymore.
Cafe latte.
Right? I mean, I guess I don't like to be married to one set of tools. It's just that for the React, I mean, it's all under the Facebook umbrella, so they force feed you Jest, and Jest 1 was terrible, and it's getting better and better. And I haven't used Mocha in years, honestly.
It's very new, and Mocha has a lot of different.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you'll have that's a lot of stuff. Like there's the shiny new untested kid on the block, and there's TJ who's like built half of your stack, right? So which one are you going to use? You're going to use the cool one, right? Or the one that's been tested for years and years. I don't know. I used to use it, and I'm just following the the trade winds right now. Right now, everybody's using this, so let's learn
I
it.
would suggest, just because so much of the stuff I was doing was based on React anyways, but
Yeah.
the other thing too is that they have a lot of it, instead of having to go out and get a bunch of these different tools, it combines a whole bunch of different tools into one.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I can do my code coverage test with it as well.
Right. Yeah, and like Michael was showing me some stuff with that. Like, they just make it too easy not to use. So that's not a slight on Mocha. Obviously, it's cool, but I mean, that's the nature of the game. Like it was the king for a while, and now somebody else.
Snapshots.
Yeah,
right?
doing
No,
Snapshots are a big
snapshots. No. You start. I will fight everybody in here on snapshots. I fought everybody at work. Yeah. So okay. I do have one last thing, but before we get to it, who's familiar with snapshots other than you two? Okay. So.
It's different than Snapchat.
I don't know. Maybe. So I mentioned the whole TDD thing, which is where you write a failing test, you write the code to make it pass, so then you know your code works, and then you make your code better and better, and just keep it green. That's a weird concept, but once you get used to it, it's very friendly, and it makes a lot of sense. And snapshots are a newish feature that Jess has added, which is essentially the opposite of TDD. It's the way that I've been untrained, and it's like I got a component, I put in these props, it rendered as this. That's it. That's my snapshot. Now it does this like serialized dump that you're supposed to check in and humans should read, but I know nobody does, because here's the other thing, the dirty secrets, right? I'm exposing all about testing. It seems really cool, but in practice, we've been doing it for a year. And I don't know anybody that sees a failed snapshot and doesn't just run it -u. Update the snapshot then. It's completely useless. It's like, hey, this is different than you expected. Oh, update the snapshot. That's what actually happens in real life. And so, I don't know, I'm very opinionated about that. I don't really, I guess if you saw, hey, something changed and I didn't expect, it's like...
it's 19 hours.
Yeah, it's like, you know, like a moving box or something like that where you need like a seal where you know if somebody's tampered with it. It's that sort of concept. I guess their intention is to ameliorate some of the need to go in and look at how something actually renders. The idea is like I built it, it looks good, I looked at it in the UI, I tested every browser because I'm a good dev, and so it's perfect, so let me add a snapshot, and now I'll know if anything changes. That's the idea, that's the sales pitch. But in real life, everybody I've ever met, when the snapshot is causing your test to fail, you do -u, update the snapshot. And so it has no teeth. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. If somebody has a different perspective, I'd love to argue against you later. But
I feel like you're arguing for protected snapshots that don't allow -u.
I mean, you do need to update them. It's backwards. It's like it's the opposite of.
They automated it, so where you change your file, it's not
Like add some hash to the I don't know. I mean, like, I'm sure somebody has. It's a big internet.
You should probably hook it up to like only run on PRs and then.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, wait a minute. Here, we're starting to get into Seven Bridges talk here. Let's finish this up. All right. So, what were we talking about? Anyway, this is fun though. Thank you, because I know this is a very dry topic, and I've seriously almost killed dozens of people talking about this. So if it keeps you alive and breathing, like, please talk about snapshots later. So what were we doing? We got.
What's your last?
I forget where we were actually. What is going on? Oh, here, let's read the error message. It's throwing. Something happened to our code. I expected on login, blah, blah, blah. It should have been omitted. I expected it to be called with 1, but it was called with undefined. Well, we don't need it to be called with 1. That was silly. We just wanted it to be called, period. Again, Tess, you got to read the error message because the answer is right there. So the last thing, I don't have any notes because high order components. Yeah, this is a high order component. That's basically, there we go. Thank you. So we saw that we can use this cool little wrapped component thing, which is not an Easter egg, but it's kind of weird and it gets the job done. But we saw, remember, that if we mess with this stuff, it's not covered by our test anymore because we're just jumping to the wrapped component. And I'm not too much of a nervous Nelly, but I do like to be explicit, right? And so this is just confusing because I'm importing user container, not really. It's the connected user container, and then I'm using this kind of hidden feature to get access to it. And that just doesn't make me feel good. So there's something else we can do. Again, I'm not telling you how to do stuff. Not that one case fits every situation, but what if, just for the heck of it, what if I export man, I would have messed up the drum roll there. I export the user container and then instead of importing the default, sorry for if people aren't familiar with ES6 stuff, I'm saying import the user container here, right? And then just treat it like a regular component because it is. Now, that's like heresy. I'm exporting, I'm expanding the surface area of this component or this module, whatever, just for the sake of testing. And like I've yelled at people for doing stuff like that, adding test handles and stuff like that. Any artifacts in the code for the sake of testing, it's like, how dare you? And I get my wet noodle and lash them. But honestly, is it that bad? Like, I mean, if somebody wants to use this user container elsewhere in the app, I mean, they can. It's kind of silly. And what is the cost of this? I think the cost of this, holding your nose and saying like, yeah, I know it's not best practice, but versus using this hidden user container, I think this is on par, if not less evil. So that's an option. And that, since we opened that door of, what the heck, let's export stuff just to test it. So, I mean, I don't want anybody to pass out here. But what if we exported that? Because remember, we're not testing this stuff anymore. It's a big hole because we were too lazy to test it the right way, and we want to just get our job done. So now we're not testing this stuff. And remember, it's all jacked up. It still logs in, but it doesn't log out. But, we took a step down this path. Let's take another one. Let's export map dispatch, right? And so, okay, well, let's import it. Whoop. Map dispatch to props. And I apologize to anybody that doesn't know Redux and what that stuff means, but you'll find out. So I'm going to say it should map dispatch to props correctly, right? Now this is going to be a pretty silly test, but just to get it on the board. So I expect that map dispatch to props dot on login, I expect that to be defined. And if we go over here, user container, and it should map dispatch to props correctly. So now we can start interrogating this. And yeah, we exported just to test, but like so, our test is dead simple now, and we have access to any piece of it. And again, like, what's the harm if some goofball in your company wants to come in and borrow your map dispatch to props? They can. And honestly, I can think of situations where it's not a terrible idea. And as a bonus, because you guys have been so patient and cool, I'm going to show you another way to piss off all of the purists. I guess it's a divided house, but the idea is that these tests, they make some sort of setup, they exercise something, and then they make an assertion. And that's really helpful. That's the pattern that you use. And if one goes wrong, that assertion failed, I know what's wrong. So again, a lot of people will tell you that means one assertion per test. If you have a whole bunch of them and it fails, you don't immediately know which one it is, right? Bullocks. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was different back in the day, but I expect map dispatch to props to also have on log out. So I have two different assertions in here in one block. Oh no, whatever. Is it right? No. Does it work? Yeah. So, and you can see over here, well, I see that this isn't working. And if I go and look, pardon the resolution again, if I go and look at it, I got this arrow with a hidden line number because of my color scheme that points exactly to which assertion failed. So that kind of pokes a lot of holes in that one assertion per block thing, right? Because I go right to it and say, oh, this one's failing. Why is that? Well, now that we have adequate test coverage, we can say, okay, well, I got my map dispatch to props. I've imported it. It's over here. On logout is, oh yeah, that was my cleverly staged demo earlier of breaking it. So we fix that. Now all of a sudden, we're testing the component. We're testing that it's being mapped properly. We're testing the map dispatch to props. It's green. And if we want to keep going, if we wanted to export this, if we wanted to whatever we want, we could keep going. So this is not the way I did this for a couple of years. These kind of tests were terrible. They were so painful. This, as long as you're willing to kind of think outside the box and maybe admit that, yeah, this isn't the best testing strategy, but it is very cheap and it provides a lot of value, then I think that's fine. So wait, final thoughts. Is it Maripovich that does that? I don't know. I don't want to get preachy. I just think that, like, I hope that, we saw regular thing, how to test something ugly using instance and that sort of stuff, using templates to kind of give you a kickstart, and, going against the grain and exporting just for the sake of tests. They're not the right way to do things, but they're not terrible, and they keep that balance. So don't think tests are a waste. Don't think tests will answer all of your questions and fix everything. Somewhere in the middle is more appropriate. They are a tool. Don't miss up, or don't pass up on a good tool because you don't know how to use it. Also, don't spend a lot of time tripping over your tools. Just figure out different ways to use them. And yeah, so that's it. If again, I would love feedback from anybody because I haven't done this a lot. But yeah, I don't really know. I spent so much time on this, I didn't finish the end. So that's the end. Any questions? Oh, thank you. So yeah, and again, if you can't tell, like, I like this stuff, so I will talk about any of it until they turn off the lights. So,
Any questions?
ready to go? Anybody?
What
Yes.
about React Unit or Skinty?
Sorry?
The other testing tools like React Unit or Skinty?
I don't know. I actually don't know those. I don't know if that was. There's the one that you keep mentioning. I keep forgetting. That sounds promising. It's enforcing keeping your distance and using good selectors like a human would. I haven't, honestly, with React, I have basically stuck with Enzyme. I think at first I was trying to shoehorn Nightwatch in there, and that was just terrible. And yeah, so I honestly, I don't know. If you know anything about them, I think, no? Okay. I don't know. They don't pay me enough.
That's my
So.
reaction.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I see you have an assertion that checks if your on login has been called, for the sake of keeping line 12.
Yep.
I was wondering if there's anything similar for rendering components for the sake of keeping your tests component specific. Can you check to see if component renders another component?
Like, does this component contain another one? Yeah, let's this is what Enzyme does. It's really good at it. This sort of goes into the shallow versus mount stuff, so you get like a superficial version. But yeah, let's look real quick. Our app, right? We have app test.js. Let's vote. Gosh, let me just print that out real quick. So I guess this is a good segue. My basic it should render test, that's useless as soon as there's another test. So I'm just going to write over this one. And so I want to say that, inside of this we have a oh, this is perfect. You are my plant. We have this user container suspiciously in here. How can we check this? So what I like, we'll just keep it simple. I want to say it should render a user container, right? And I'm going to make my wrapper. So I'm going to say, hey, I want a shallow render of my app component. And I want to say I expect wrapper find user container. So that would be like a jQuery sort of selector. There are a number of ways to do this, but find.length is pretty easy. And I expect it to have one. Oh my goodness, it didn't work. So, watch this. Well, maybe I just don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to change this to an H1 just to see. Am I writing the test the right way? Maybe not.
Is it links.2b?
Yeah. Hey. See, that's why you write the test first. 2b. Thank you. I expect it to be 1. So, okay, yeah, there is an H1. That's not what you asked about, though. You said I want to test another component, right? I want to see. What about the user container? I want to see if that's in there. No, it's not. Look at this. I'm going to do a combo with 2 plants. What is going on here? Because it's right there, and it found the H1. So, like, what's going on? No, it's not the div. Good. That's a good guess though, because it's shallow, so it's confusing because they are there in a superficial sort of way. So you can look at them and you can touch them a little bit, but they don't fully exist. So here's a great debugging tool that took me way too long to find. Again, console log. Man, I mean, like if you can pass calculus count on your fingers, like why not? So I'm gonna do wrapper.debug. Check it out. I just logged out what it's rendering, right? And I see a div, I see a header, I see an H1, I see Rubik's Cube, I see this pesky connect user container thing. Oh my goodness, that connect is going to be the death of me, right? So this can, you saw that it worked with the H1 example, and we try another one, it didn't work. We can debug and see why. So check it out. This is what we call display name. It's customizable, so watch out. So I want to change this to connect user container, right? And it works. That's crazy. Don't do that. Because check this out. Just to be a jerk, because you know this stuff happens, right? I want to change this to, let's just call this the connected version, right? And then I'm going to export the connected version. That's pretty risky, right? But we got unit tests, so look at that. They're all working. Yeah, that's right. Man, this is like the encore. Can't you wait till I mess it up? The mapped, the display name is it's mutable or it's customizable anyway. So if you were so inclined, you could say, hey, connected.display name equals potato. And okay, everything's working except for this app. I named that something bizarre, but this is not working. Why is that? Well, let's focus on it again. App. Why is this not working? Let's log it. Oh yeah, because we don't have that. We have a potato in here. It's kind of fun because I like checking in stuff like this in tests, not in the actual production code. Be careful. Always keep it PG too, because you never know. But I like using bizarre. I don't just use foo and bar because, like, if you see potato showing up, it should be easy to find that. You should have a lot of instances of potato, right? So just another fun thing. Okay, so we can see this display name. It's set to this by the Connect library, or by Connect. But you can change that. Why would you change that? I mean, there are reasons. You just like the way it looks here. You know, I mean, you could do that. So my point is, just like we talked about using good selectors, if you run into something like this, usually the sort of standard name, the class name, or even if you're using a stateless component, it can sort of infer the name of the function. That usually gets you most of the way there. But if you run into something funky like this, don't even bother with the string, because Enzyme has another way to find stuff that is much more reliable. Let's see. And so you could do that like this. So I'm going to copy the user container over there. I'm also going to import it here. I know that there's a but about mocking and all of that, which is very valid, but we're not getting into that. So instead of this, what do I have here? Instead of this user container thing, which could be a potato, I don't know. I'm going to pull it in over here, and here I'm going to delete the surrounding commas, and I'm going to refer to it by its constructor's name, or its class name, instead of a string. And so now you can see, yeah, it's still rendering a potato, but I am referring to it by by this, or I'm sorry, by whatever it's being exported as. So that's a really good trick. Because that identity is not going to change, and it's just the internals of how Enzyme works when it's going through to say, are you one of these? One of the sort of methods that it uses is to say, like, are you an instance of? And this surely is. And if you're not, okay, well, let me go through the list of string display names. Do you match any of these? So that's a good one. So yes, sir.
Do you want to show the code coverage?
Yeah, I don't think I have much, but
Just do a yarn test and then dash dash.
yarn test.
Dash 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 dash.
No, you don't need that. You don't need it anymore.
No.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, they got rid of it.
Yeah, shouldn't need it anymore with the modern. Hey, our potato's still showing up. So anyway, yeah. Also, be nice to your PR people and remove your console logs, even if they're in the test. As an anecdote, like does everybody remember the prop types will soon be deprecated?
Yes.
Yeah. So that came in 15, I think. I know this guy who knows a guy who still thousands of tests provoke thousands of warnings about that, plus a bunch of console logs, and he hates all of it. So anyway, so I'm actually not super familiar with this. So if ignore that goof here, but if Michael, if you would like to describe what we're looking at, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know about the dash coverage flag or option. And basically, if the test suite passes, it gives a line coverage report, and it'll show you the uncovered lines on what files. And this is useful if you're looking to up your coverage. Also, this all writes to a coverage folder. So if you do ls, usually your coverage folder is not in a git ignore, so it doesn't get included. And then you can hook it up to like CodeCub, which is an npm install, and CodeCub just takes the coverage report that it generates on like a Travis CI, and it'll ship it to its website, and then people can see over time how your code coverage has changed, and it allows for diffable code coverage in your pull request. So if a new PR decreases test coverage, that might cause it to fail if you've set up that rule. And in this way, you can like ensure that as your code grows, your test coverage grows, or it meets a minimum threshold.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, this is really cool. And I don't have it here. And again, I'm too private to go into my random Chrome history, see where I found it. But he did send me a link to the UI part of it. And yeah, the HTML might not look cool here, but if you got the right thing to present it, it's really cool with lots of fun donut charts that you can click and drill in. And I think it even had almost like a heat map of like where the code was being tested, which is really neat. So thank you for adding that, by the way.
Yeah, because this is nice because if you just had some code that you just blindly needed more coverage on, this would be a way to find out what a developer could work on.
Mhm.
Coverage for it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, so everybody is invited to Seven Bridges. Try to get some community going on.
And
Are we allowed to talk about testing?
real quick, we want to make sure they had to take off, but thank Brook Source for providing food.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you for spearheading this. For those who don't know, my name is Greg Russell. I'm the recruiting manager here at Availity. Please check out our website, see if there's any position you might be interested in. This is my friend Craig Tucker. He works over at Beeline. They're hiring as well. Craig, did you want to talk about the position you have up right now?
Yeah, well, we're, I'm going to sound a little stupid here because I don't know a lot about it because literally yesterday we have a software engineer 3 opening out there, and the 3 really doesn't mean anything because you may come from wherever you may come and be a 5 and in Beeline you're a 2, or be a 1 and in Beeline you're a 5. So that doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're going to get into mobile. So the use of React is going to be reinstated back at Beeline. About a year and a half ago, we were bought, sold, and Beeline kind of went into the tank from a technology standpoint. For those of you in the room that might know that or might not, but there was a lot of anxiety. Culture took a deep dive, and so it was difficult for me to sell to you to come and work for us. So Beeline's back on the right side, but you know, if you guys know of folks that are out there looking for full-time, it's a great environment, great culture, very similar to what Greg has going on over here with Availity. We're kind of a microcosm of of an availability. We're only 450 people, and we're global. But it's a pretty neat shop, pretty smart people, strong opinions.
Oh.
But that's what you all give, right? And so it's great for discussion. And I think it's a great environment. I've been there 4 years, and as you can see, I've been around a little bit. And I could recruit, and Greg could recruit probably just about anywhere he wanted to, but this is where he wants to recruit because he likes the culture, he likes the business. The same with Beeline. So I feel pretty good about bringing people in now. And even then, I mean, no matter where you go, things change, opportunities arise and vanish, and businesses get bought and sold. But I think Beeline's got a pretty good thing going on. Great stack. I wish I knew it. So, I actually texted and emailed one of our developers, a guy by the name of Seth Wenzel, who left and came back to say, hey, what's our stack? So I wanted to tell you all that. It sounded like I really knew what I was talking about. But it's pretty neat. It's a good deal. Check us out, www.beeline.com. And if you know of anybody that's interested in full-time work.
You guys are still heavily invested in .NET and Node.js?
Yes. Well, now, so we were bought by a private equity firm. You guys mind if I sit down?
No.
We were bought by a private equity firm, merged with a major competitor. That major competitor is IQN, so we produce a vendor management system. Very similar to an ATS. You go out and you apply for a job, you go to an ATS. Well, we're managing contractual or temporary workforce with our vendor management system.